Chapter 6. Mike sat at his kitchen table. In one hand, he held his cell phone. The other hand was turning a soda can around and around on the scratched formica surface. The ever-circling can was next to Steve Raglan's business card. The card was crumpled. Sweat beaded the outside of the soda can, and Mike's fingers were wet and getting wetter. Still, he kept turning the can. He couldn't bring himself to do what he knew he needed to do. Mike glanced over at Abby, who sat on the sofa watching a noisy cartoon. Mike wasn't sure what she was watching, but there was howling coming from the set, and a lot of raucous laughter. It was getting on Mike's nerves. Well, no, the sounds from the TV weren't really what was getting on his nerves. It was Abby herself who was bugging him. As Abby watched the TV, she frequently pointed at it and then looked to her left, as if sharing a moment with someone Mike couldn't see. Another invisible friend. What was Mike going to do about Abby's imaginary friends? Looking away from Abby, Mike's gaze landed on the custody papers he tossed under the table when he and Abby had gotten home. He had left them face down, but he knew he needed to pick them up and put them away. Abby didn't need to know what was going on. Yet. Mike stood and stuffed the papers in a kitchen drawer. The papers reminded Mike of Jane's plan. Mike's attention shifted back to Abby.
"See?" Abby whispered. "Bears can do that."
A horrifying thought leapt out of the miasma of confusion in Mike's head. How would Aunt Jane deal with Abby's invisible friends if she had custody? As soon as Mike asked himself the question, he knew the answer. Jane would have Abby put in some kind of institution. And once Abby was put away, Jane would find a way to take all the money in Abby's trust fund. Mike let go of the soda can, wiped his fingers on his jeans, then pulled the business card closer to him. He punched Raglan's number into his phone. Abby continued to watch her cartoon and discuss it with her invisible friend. Mike took a deep breath as he listened to the phone ringing in his ear. A click. Raglan's voice. In its raspy mode. "This is Raglan."
"Hi," Mike said. "Mr. Raglan? This is Mike Schmidt."
Raglan didn't speak. All Mike could hear was the faint sound of breathing coming through the phone line.
The guy who, stomped out of your, office yesterday?"
Mike tried. More silence. Mike counted in his head. 1, 2, 3.
Yes,"
Raglan said. His voice had switched to smooth. Then the voice turned gruff.
"Mister, I can't work nights."
Mike pulled the phone from his ear and scowled at it. Man, he really did hate this guy. Mike's gaze shifted to Abby. He gritted his teeth and returned the phone to its proper position.
"The job you told me about,"
Mike said between his clenched teeth.
"Is it still available?"
Yes, Raglan said. "It's most definitely available. Why? Had a change of heart?"
No, Mike thought. His heart hadn't changed at all. But that didn't matter. He glanced at Abby again.
"How soon can I start?"
Mike asked. Mike's car sputtered as he turned onto the street that led through the most depressed part of town. He didn't blame the car for its hesitation. Mike didn't want to go down this street either. Potholed and swaddled, even though the sun was still grasping onto the last of the day, the long straight road was bordered by testaments to business collapse. On both sides of the cracked and broken asphalt and the crumbling sidewalk that ran alongside it, an endless march of failed or failing enterprises hulked in the descending dusk. A boarded-up factory, a derelict gas station, a small strip mall with only 3 still open, dimly lit businesses, a restaurant with only 2 cars in the parking lot, and a half-dark neon sign, a couple of bars that would make a seedy bar look upscale. This whole area would depress even the most upbeat person. Since Mike hadn't been upbeat in years, he started at a deficit, and the area shoved him even further down into the dark hole of despair. Keeping one hand on the steering wheel, Mike used the other one to hold up the piece of paper he'd scribbled Raglan's directions on. The paper was the cover page of the custody papers. Mike frowned at the directions and leaned forward to peer left and right through his windshield.
Where the hell is this place?
He asked. Too bad he didn't have an invisible friend to answer him. Instead of a helpful invisible friend, Mike had Raglan's voice in sing-a-song mode in his head.
So, here's the deal.
Raglan's voice replayed in Mike's mind. The voice rose and fell and sounded muffled, as it had when Raglan had spoken over the phone.
This place is pretty out there. It was hugely popular with the kids back in the 80s, but it's been shut down for a long time. Only reasons they haven't given it the wrecking ball treatment is the owner's kind of sentimental. Just can't bring himself to let go.
There was something weird about the way Raglan said sentimental, but Mike couldn't figure out what it was. Then or now. Checking his notes again, Mike spotted the turn he'd been told to look for. He urged the car past another shuttered business, an ex-nail salon. No great loss. There were too many of those in town anyway. The new street was narrower than the last one, and after just a couple hundred feet, it was no longer bordered by old businesses. Thick stands of tall trees pressed close to the road. It felt like Mike was heading into the countryside. Before things got too rural, though, Mike saw a deserted parking lot. It was just as Raglan had described it. Mike turned on his signal, out of habit. No one was around. He pulled off the road into the lot. As his car crept forward, swirls of drying leaves skimmed across the cracked pavement, illuminated by the car's headlights. A few paper cups, a discarded newspaper, and a wadded-up fast food bag skittered past with the leaves. Mike pulled his car farther into a lot designed to hold at least 50 or more cars. Judging from the faded to almost invisible white paint demarking the parking spots, it hadn't held that many vehicles in a very long time. Mike pulled into what once would have been the prime parking spot, just a few feet from the night-shrouded entrance of a building that was so hidden in the dark, it was little more than a sprawling shadow. Surrounded by trees and far removed from other businesses, the building had no exterior lights. The old car's headlights did little to give Mike a complete picture of the place. All he saw was red double doors and a boarded-up window. Mike turned off the engine. Typically, it chugged for a few seconds and then went quiet. Mike looked out his side window. Even though only minutes had passed since Mike had reached this part of town, dusk had abruptly given way to the night. A night completely lacking in any sort of lighting. Mike was 100% sure he was not in a safe place, but there was no turning back now. Looking left and right, Mike steeled himself. He picked up the backpack he'd loaded his overnight needs in. He got out of the car and flung the bag over his shoulder, making sure his car was locked, as if anyone would want to steal it. Mike took a few steps toward the barely visible building entrance. Once again, Mike heard Raglan's voice in his head, back to the rasp.
Anyway, there's been some trouble with break-ins over the years, Raglan said.
Vagrants, drunks.
Obviously not ideal.
No kidding, Mike said aloud now. He looked around, turning full circle. He seemed to be alone, but there were a lot of places to stay concealed. He gripped the flat strap of his backpack and thought about what he'd packed. He thought he remembered everything, but like a dolt, he hadn't thought of a flashlight. Suddenly, Mike wanted to be inside the building. He felt way too exposed. Hurrying forward, Mike headed toward the double doors. The doors were faded red, and judging from a few dents on their panels, they were made of metal. He quickly found the security pad next to the doors, just where Raglan had said it would be. The code was an easy one. Mike had it memorized, so he quickly typed it in. A loud click came from the door. The disengaged lock, Mike figured. He stepped to his left and grabbed a thick, vertical black metal handle. He pulled open one of the heavy doors. The door creaked. Of course it creaked. Mike ignored the shiver that frisked down his spine. It felt like one of the dry leaves from the road had gotten inside his shirt and was tumbling end over end toward his tailbone. Mike stepped into the building. Leaving the door open, just in case. Mike hesitated on the edge of deep gloom. He inhaled several odors that made him doubt whether he'd made the right decision. The air smelled stale, not a surprise for an old, mostly unoccupied place. But more than just musty air met Mike's nostrils. Beneath a resounding clang nearly launched Mike straight up out of his black sneakers. He whirled. Either the wind had shoved at the door, or it was on a self-closing hinge. The door was shut. As threatening as the deserted area outside had felt, the closed door was an even more powerful trigger of Mike's fight-or-flight response. His heart rate doubled. He had a powerful urge to throw himself at the door and run for his life. It was silly. Get a grip, he told himself. Mike's words seemed to caper away from him before coming back. The faint echo rotated around him. He ignored the disconcerting smell of the place and studied his surroundings. Barely lit beneath fluorescent light panels that had old dim bulbs and dirty frosted glass coverings, the expanse in front of Mike was a large, maybe 30 feet around, lobby. The right and left sides of the lobby were lined with low, red vinyl-covered benches. The opening of what looked like a long hallway extended off to the right. The other side of the lobby, opposite Mike, was a large archway. A little light shone through it, but not enough for Mike to see what was beyond it. Although the lobby's lighting was down in the fathoms dingy, Mike could see enough to be struck by the lobby's almost circusy decor. The walls above the benches were striped red and white, and the floor beneath Mike's feet was covered with black and white checked linoleum. The linoleum was cracked, and whole sections of it were peeling away from the floor. Hanging on the striped walls, rows of large old-fashioned posters behind glass advertised Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Mike took a step forward. His shoe caught on a curl of linoleum, and it crackled. Once again, Mike heard Raglan's voice in his head.
The security system is dated, but it's fully operational. Floodlights on the exterior, cameras inside and out. Fair warning, the power can be a bit screwy. If you have any issues, you'll find the system breaker in the main office. Just give it a flip.
As soon as Raglan's voice faded from Mike's brain, the already weak overhead lights flickered. Mike looked up at them. Oh, no, you don't. He better find the office, he thought. Quickly. Mike crossed the lobby and looked down the hallway. The 6-foot-wide corridor was long, and it wasn't any better lit than the lobby. At the far end of the hallway, 50 feet away from Mike, a bright red exit sign glowed. Mike used it as his North Star as he stepped forward into what felt like a creepy, dark tunnel. Raglan's voice spoke up in Mike's head again. Mike made a face. He really didn't like having the rasp/sing-song on automatic play in his mind.
No,
Mike heard Raglan say in his memory.
The rest of the building was on a different breaker, which was probably installed back when Regan was still in office.
Mike mentally hit mute on Raglan as he carefully continued forward. Mike kept his gaze sweeping left and right as he went. Mike's footsteps made a swish-tap sound as he walked over more of the old black and white linoleum. Mike could hear his breathing, too. He was still on edge. The hallway's walls were painted in the same red and white stripes Mike had seen in the lobby. They also were lined with large framed posters. These posters, however, weren't pizzeria advertisements. They were more art than marketing. Some of the posters had images of pizzas and playing children. The rest of the posters featured portraits of odd-looking cartoon animals. One of the images was of a brown bear wearing a bow tie and a top hat. The bear looked friendly enough, but Mike took pause when he continued on and spotted a bright yellow chick wearing a bib and holding a googly-eyed cupcake, a bluish-purple bunny gripping an electric guitar, and a fox wearing an eye patch and sporting a lethal-looking hook at the end of one arm. The toothy grins on those critters didn't look as benign. Mike found the fox especially to be disconcerting. The fox's one uncovered eye seemed to sparkle with good cheer. But the way the fox brandished the hook suggested that the amiability was a facade. Mike kept going. Above him, another bank of fluorescent lights dimmed a little. Raglan's voice returned to Mike's mind.
My advice to you, don't mess with anything. You've got a burning desire to die in an electric fire. No pun intended.
Haha, Mike thought, as he looked up at the feeble light. Mike took another step, and he stiffened when he heard a loud crunch. He looked down and relaxed. Just broken glass from one of the poster frames. Mike looked up at the one to his right. It featured all 4 of the cartoon animals. All but the fox stood on the stage behind old-fashioned microphones. The fox was off to the left, on his own purple curtain stage. Something about the separation felt threatening to Mike. He quickly went past the poster. He looked around and spotted the doorway. He looked ahead and spotted the doorway he was aiming for. Raglan's voice kicked in again.
You'll find the office at the end of the main hall. Last door on the right.
Mike reached the door. Like the main door to the building, it was red metal, scarred, and dented. Very dented. It looked like someone or something had tried to bash the door in. The frosted glass window in the upper part of the door, however, was intact. Strange. Mike frowned at the dents, but he reached for the black knob. It turned readily, and Mike eased the door open. Once again, he was tense, poised to flee. Jeez, he thought. Why am I so freaking jumpy? When Mike stepped into the office, nothing attacked him. Nothing reassured him, though, either. The office, dimly lit, only by a red, round blaze coming from the colored bulb above a large breaker box with a prominent red handle, was small and confining. Probably because of the single red bulb, the room made Mike think of the command rooms in submarines. The sensation of being submerged was heightened not just by the room's darkness, but also by its rank air. The last time Mike had smelled something like the air in this room, he'd been in a boxing gym with a friend. The smells there had been a combination of sweat and blood. Mike's nose twitched as he looked around. He might as well get used to the smell and familiarize himself with the space. He was going to be spending a lot of time in it. The office was pretty sparse. It contained a long, narrow black metal desk which sat in front of a matching credenza. A small black fan and a landline phone next to an answering machine sat on it. The desk held an old TV sitting on top of an equally old VCR, a desktop computer, and several CCTV monitors stacked on a rack at the back edge of the desk. 2 gray metal filing cabinets were pushed against the wall opposite the desk. One of the filing cabinets was missing a couple of drawers. The other was badly banged up along the front, as if it had been knocked over. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor. He saw long scratch marks that seemed to match the length of the filing cabinet. The marks didn't make him any happier than the office's smell did. Mike pulled his gaze from the scratch marks. He looked up at the unlit fluorescent lights above him. He noticed the bank of lights was next to an intercom speaker. Mike looked toward the breaker box again. Next to the breaker box, a large gray metal locker stood alone, looking like it had run away from its friends in a high school hallway. Mike raised an eyebrow. Was he supposed to keep his stuff in that?
Mostly you'll just be hanging out in the office.
Raglan's voice played out in Mike's head again.
The job's pretty easy. Just keep an eye on the monitors and don't let anyone in. Piece of cake, right?
The very second that Mike's inner Raglan voice stopped, the feeble light in the office and in the hallway went out completely. All the electricity cut out. The only remaining illumination came from the red emergency bulb. Uh-oh, Mike said. Nope. He immediately strode toward the bulb and grabbed the lever on the breaker box. As he shoved the lever upward, Raglan's voice started up again.
See you on the flip side,
Raglan had said.